Yeah, definitely. So there's two big ones that I think of a lot. So, we're in the middle of this data revolution. That's one of the big changes I've seen happen within the fashion industry in the last decade or so. We have all this information, and what I feel like brands are doing is sometimes they're not sure how to interpret that, or they're not sure exactly what to do with it, or how to use it as a jumping off point for future focused ideas. So that's one of the things that Moonshot really focuses on. Data, it tells you what your customer is doing, but it doesn't tell you why. It doesn't give you the backstory. And it also doesn't tell you necessarily what they're going to do in the future, because you're kind of missing that qualitative, more emotional piece. So I think for brands, I see them analyzing data in ways that are just a little bit one-sided. So, helping them understand that they need to unlock the full 360 view of their customer. I always say, like, trend, culture, mindset, values. You have to know that, put those together with your data, then you're getting a full picture of your customer, but it can't just be one-sided. And, I think along with that, the other thing that I see brands do is just not understanding their customer well enough. And, when I was doing my master's degree, had a professor, and he was saying in our business class, you should know that you're every customer on a first name basis, and of course, as you scale, that's harder. But I've always kept that with me, because I think of that a lot. Like, you have to know everything about your customer. You have to understand, their struggles, what's hard about their lives, what they're worried about, what they care about. All those things matter. And, developing empathy and kind of putting yourself in their shoes and understanding what their needs are really is what it's all about. And I think companies sort of rush that part a little bit, or they get part of the picture put together. But you got to go deep there, and then you can build on that. And that's your foundation. But if you don't have that, I think it puts a lot of companies kind of on the back foot from the beginning. Oh, okay. So dinner table. Well, Friday nights was probably the biggest family meal time. And so we always sat around the dinner table Friday nights. And otherwise, growing up in the 80s, 90s, we were always involved in sports and all kinds of other crazy things. So during the week, we were kind of around and about and just grabbing whatever we could. But yeah, Friday nights, weekends, family movie nights, those are sort of my main memories of that time,
Very
probably.
cool. Very cool. What was your main sport that you played?
I played softball.
Nice, nice, very nice. So did you have any entrepreneurial tendencies growing up, or did that not come until after you had a little corporate stint?
So I did. So my parents owned their own business
Ah,
always. So they're
okay.
both CPAs, and they owned their own CPA firm for a really long time in the small town. So I grew up in Tennessee, just outside Nashville. And, so I always had their influence, as a child, I spent a lot of time at the office, which wasn't my
hmm
favorite thing then. Now I
Yeah.
see was a gift, because I had a chance to really witness kind of what it was like day to day to own your own business. And I mean, as a kid, I always had side hustles. So I was selling bookmarks in the cafeteria in third grade. And then I got told that I wasn't allowed to make money on school grounds. So then I had to, like, pivot and
Yeah.
figure out a way to make money off of school grounds. Yeah, even when I was working full time, I had a brand on the side called YCHL Collective, and I did hand painted leather jackets. So I feel like it's been a common thread for me.
hmm
I wanted to start my own business right when I finished my master's degree, but my student loans said otherwise.
Yeah. They
So
would.
that's why.
Yeah.
So I started working for a while. But yeah, so coming back to entrepreneurship, I mean, it feels exactly like where I should be, where I want to be. So
hmm
it's been a fun journey.
And you mentioned a couple of times in the green room about your creative side, and that you're painting leather jackets. What types of things were you painting on leather jackets?
So I do a lot of florals mostly, but then I also did a lot of, kind of made to order stuff. So whatever people were requesting, I did one whole jacket that was Rolling Stones lyrics, which was
Okay.
super cool. Yeah, so all kinds of different things. And at the time, as I was working in corporate and I had moved up the ladder, I was in, more of a leadership position.
hmm
And did get to do that hands-on creative part as much. And that's what I really love and enjoy. So it gave me a chance to sort of stretch my creative muscles and just stay in touch with, why I got into this industry in the
hmm
first place. And so that was what was fun about it.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the industry and what it was that you were doing so that the listeners kind of understand your background.
Yeah. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm from Nashville, and I moved to London when I was 18 to study fashion. I only ever wanted to be in fashion for as long as I can remember. So I did undergrad and masters there, and then I've worked in the fashion industry for a little more than 15 years now. Most of that time spent in the corporate world for different brands. So I worked in London and Paris and New York, and spent some time in Ohio. And mainly I stayed within the kind of trend forecasting, kind of strategy and insight space for youth brands.
Hmm.
And yeah, so that's sort of, my industry and where I focused. But, at 15 years, it's starting to feel, I mean, I've seen the industry change astronomically in 15 years. So I'm really starting to get some perspective as I look back and I think about what it was like when I first entered the industry versus what it's like now. I mean, it's almost unimaginable the amount of change that's happened since then.
Yeah. And I have to ask you, you mentioned that you were in Ohio. I'm from Ohio, so I'm curious, what were you down in Columbus or were you in North Ohio or Northern Ohio or where?
Yeah, yeah, Columbus, and
Okay.
yeah, just outside Columbus.
Yeah, that's what I
Um,
kind of thought. I know a lot of big brands and all of that sort of consider Columbus as sort of the melting pot of America, right? It's kind of cross between East and West. So I know there's a lot of
yeah,
studies and whatnot that go on down there.
exactly. I mean, so I've heard the statistic that outside of London, or sorry, outside of New York and LA, I think Columbus has the third highest concentration of fashion designers and
Hmm.
creatives because there's a lot of retailers that are based here. So yeah, there's an amazing creative community, and that's why. So my husband and my daughter and I, we've been here for quite a few years now. We love it. Yeah,
Very
it's a fun
cool. Very
community.
cool. Yeah, no, love Columbus. Okay, so talk about some of the, I guess some of the things that you saw, when you first started in the fashion industry, and then fast forward to today. What are some of those transitions? What are some of those changes that you're noticing now?
I mean, the biggest is digital and e-com, and how e-com, it's all e-com first, digital first. And of course, the pandemic really accelerated that, but that was already happening. I mean, so we were already headed. We did sort of like 3 to 5 years worth of growth in about 9 months, in the last year. So that was happening. And then I think the other big one is just this massive power shift. And because of digital technology, because of social media, it's really put the customer in control.
Hmm.
So in the fashion industry, trends used to be very much trickle down. They started on runway. Magazine editors really were setting a lot of the trends, and then it would sort of trickle down to the rest of the market. And now it's very customer driven. And we're also, because I work with youth brands, I work with Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They're super empowered. They're very focused on, identity and individualism. So they're great at crafting their own style and putting it out in the world. And so for brands today, it's really all about how to connect with them authentically, how to create an ecosystem where you're kind of communicating back and forth and sharing ideas. And so I think the big shift has been, especially as a trend forecaster, looking at those influences and how they've changed over time. And it's just done a complete 180. So yeah, that's been super interesting to watch.
Yeah, very cool. So explain a little bit about what Moonshot does. Moonshot, your company.
Yeah, so Moonshot is an agency that uncovers the trend, mindset, and cultures of the world's most powerful generation. So this is all about Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And really, the overarching mission here is to help shape the future of the fashion industry by aligning brands with the progressive values of these emerging youth consumers.
Hmm.
So this is a win-win situation. This is about helping brands stay aligned with these customers, but it's also about helping them operate more ethically, more inclusive, more sustainably. And, because those are the values that these customers are bringing
Hmm.
along. These values are baseline for Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So, it's a fun area to work in because of that win-win situation. But yeah, so Moonshot is just all about uncovering opportunities kind of at the center of youth culture and fashion,
Yeah,
essentially.
interesting. Are you working with people that are actually creating their own clothing, designing their own clothing, or is it resellers? What types of people would you say that you work with?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. So from retail, from brands, from like teen brands and kids brands, and then you mentioned resale. So that's a huge part of the youth market going forward. So the
Hmm.
circular economy, this idea of designing garments with zero waste is really driving,
Oh, I like that.
youth brands in the future. So that's a huge part of my research currently. And really, that resale and that vintage market is being driven by the teen customer right now. So that's forecasted to grow astronomically over the next 5 years.
Hmm.
So, there's a lot of brands that are doing that on their own. I also am interested in working with larger brands and helping them kind of own a piece of that market, also like own their resale market, find a way to continue to extract value from their goods, not just at that first point of purchase, but at other points of purchase down the line too. So that's kind of a big focus at the moment.
Yeah, interesting. So what types of, I guess, how large of a footprint are your customers typically? Are we talking about, large brands that, own many locations, or are we, the one storefront type place? Is it, a certain amount online or certain footprint online? Give a little demographic of who your normal customers would be.
Yeah, so different sizes. So I've worked with large billion-dollar brands, kind of industry-leading brands, and
Mhm.
I've worked with small startups. And the way Moonshot works is I have this network of industry-leading experts in all kinds of areas in fashion. And because I've been in the industry so long, I've know people in every corner, and can curate by project. So that's
Mhm.
been one of the real strengths of Moonshot, is that when we come in to a company, we can sort of shapeshift and be whatever we need to be. And we can fit the expertise of a startup. We can fit the expertise of these like larger kind of industry leading retailers, which is where a lot of my experience is. So yeah, it can kind of be arranged, but it's really all about the youth market. So brands that are operating within that space.
And so are you going in and telling them, you should, carry this line, or, change this about your messaging? What are some of the services that you would go in and help them with?
Yeah, it could be a little bit of both of those. So we look at it from kind of two pronged for the most part. So there's the product apparel side, and then there's more of the marketing side. And depending on the brand, they might need help more in one or the other.
Mhm.
But what I think Moonshot does best is when we kind of get in at the ground floor and we work with brands before you really even get to the apparel design side, or before you then later get to the marketing stage. It's really all about kind of like creating that baseline of understanding who their customer is, who
Mhm.
their current customer is, where's their white space opportunity for them to grow that market share that they have. And then also the most important thing is being able to forecast over time the way that your customers' culture and values and mindset is going to change over time. So that's really Moonshot's main strength, is kind of uncovering, like defining exactly who that customer is, and then helping companies understand where the opportunities lie. And again, it might be from a product point of view, it might be from brand messaging or for content, but that's sort of all starts with who the customer is.
Interesting. When you were mentioning I don't remember the exact term you used, but basically the zero waste garments, how is it that, if I'm uh, a reseller, or if I'm, someone who's interested in making my own garments, are there any things that I can look for so that I can understand, what that environmental impact is that, I'm having by producing these garments? Is there any way to be able to determine that? Because that's something that I'm absolutely passionate about. I hate, wasting anything.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd love to be able to understand, even the things that I'm buying as a consumer aren't impacting, the environment any more than they need to. So any
Mm-hmm.
advice or tips there?
Yeah, definitely. One of the best resources online currently is called Fashion Revolution. You can go to their website. They're also great to follow on Instagram, but on their website, they have a whole section that's just for consumers. So they have a lot of great information it's not necessarily targeted for the fashion industry. So it's really about helping people understand their personal footprint and how they can do better.
Mhm.
And then, they have different pledges that people can take. And for instance, I am taking the No New Clothes 2021 pledge currently.
I
I'm
like
not
it.
buying anything
I'll
new.
send it to my girlfriend.
Yeah, I am doing all circular fashion for 2021, which has been an amazing journey so far. I feel like I'm learning a lot, but yeah, but Fashion Revolution is a great place to go if you're just starting in this journey and you have questions, or if you really want to understand more about the global footprint of the fashion industry, just from a, top down point of view. They've got great statistics there for that.
And what is the circular, what did you call it? Circular what?
Yeah, circular economy.
Circular economy. So what is that?
Mhm.
Explain that.
Yeah, so it's this idea of designing for zero waste. And, there's the school of thought within design that anytime you design a product or a garment that doesn't have, where you're not designing the end of life for that, then that's a huge design flaw. And that's been around for a while, but it's really starting to become mainstream. And again, this is really being pushed to the front by youth consumers. Like they really care about this a lot. So specifically for youth consumers, what circular economy looks like is resale, vintage, and those two markets, which are going to grow so much, are being driven by Gen Z and teenagers. Regenerated fibers, recyclable fibers, rental is another good example of that. So, if you have a special occasion, instead of buying a whole new outfit for it, you're just going to rent and send it back.
Yeah.
A friend of mine the other day was just telling me her whole wedding was rented, including her wedding dress.
Wow.
And yeah, so I think it's incredible. And it's just, ways to limit waste, ways to keep clothing in circulation longer. What we don't want is for people to buy clothing that only get worn once and they sit in the closet and then they're accumulating more. So, but a big part of this that's so interesting is navigating this customer journey of consuming less. Because I think, you can't truly have a circular economy if we're continuing this rate of consumption, which I think, currently it's estimated we need 1.6 planet Earths to keep up with our consumption rate. So we have to consume less.
Yeah.
So that's sort of why I'm on this journey of no new clothes, because I'm interested from the customer point of view. Where are the holes? Where is it difficult? Where are the gaps from a category point of view? Like what categories need to do better? So yeah, but it's a huge topic. It's super important for the industry.
And so where are some of those holes that you're seeing? Like what I guess you're saying that you're going on this no new clothes journey for 2021. That basically means you are not shopping at all, right? You're not going and buying anything, even if it is, recycled or, and when I'm saying that, I'm thinking of like walking into the thrift store. So I'm not buying new, I'm buying something that's already been used, already been worn. So vintage, I guess you could call that too. So where are some of the holes or the gaps that you are starting to see that, I guess are developing in that train of thought or that idea of living?
Yeah. So from a category perspective, swimwear has been a bit tough, activewear, underwear, things like that. Those have been the categories that are sort of the hardest. It's easiest to find special occasion wear or, anything vintage. So like in terms of outfitting, like that's been pretty easy. I've been a vintage shopper my whole life. So, that part has been really fun, but what I'm finding more interesting, and this was sort of unexpected, is that kind of emotional journey as a customer and what it means to buy less, and also kind of understanding what those triggers for overconsumption are for me, and sometimes how they're really linked to something emotional. It's like, you have a bad day, you do a bit of shopping, you feel a little bit better, and that's not available to me now. So it's interesting where you kind of have to be like, oh, I had a bad day and I'm not going to fix it with shopping. I guess I'll just have to, like hang out with this feeling for a minute and like dig in and figure out what's there. So, while that seems super abstract, it's really important for customers to know, because there is one big school of thought that says that fashion brands really have to help figure out how to give these dopamine hits that people get from shopping in a way that isn't tied to physical product. So whether that's through content that they create or whether that's through the, customer brand relationship, there's lots of different ways to do it. But I think it's, that dopamine hit that we've all been trained to kind of like get on this train of overconsumption. And that's a big part of it, the way that you feel when you shop. And so apart from the mechanics or categories that are lacking, to me, this has been really the more interesting part to kind of dig into, because I think it's a real hurdle for brands, and I think they have to figure out how to navigate that part.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any type of markings or anything like that on any of the clothes so that you know that if you are going to buy something, again, it is a product that is more environmentally friendly than others? Is there any type of
So
standardization there or no?
not exactly yet, but there is something that's in the works, more of like a digital footprint. And I think that's being run by a company called Eon.
Okay.
And this is really about kind of tracking the provenance of garments. And what's great about this is that it can help you understand, how many times a garment has been purchased,
Hmm.
but it also stores all the information of the exact fiber content and care instructions. So that's super important for recycling, because a lot of things can't be recycled because when they end up where they do, the tags are missing, or you don't exactly know what the fibers are.
Yeah.
So this idea of digital passports is huge, like potentially industry changing, because it would really give the ability to track that. And then for luxury, it has a lot of implications because you can really authenticate,
Yeah.
you can get rid of this idea of counterfeit product and really protect quality. So that's kind of a cool thing that's happening.
And I'm assuming that's all on blockchain too. It's all,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. I had no idea about the blockchain application there. So that's pretty cool. What are some of the, I guess, some of the mistakes that you see um, people making today when they're looking to establish their brand, again, for the future and looking forward? Are there any common mistakes that you see people that may have been in the fashion industry for the last 10ish or so years? Um, any type of advice or again, common things that you're seeing that aren't going to necessarily translate into the next generation of people coming up?
Yeah, definitely. So there's two big ones that I think of a lot. So, we're in the middle of this data revolution. That's one of the big changes I've seen happen within the fashion industry in the last decade or so. We have all this information, and what I feel like brands are doing is sometimes they're not sure how to interpret that, or they're not sure exactly what to do with it, or how to use it as a jumping off point for future focused ideas. So that's one of the things that Moonshot really focuses on. Data, it tells you what your customer is doing, but it doesn't tell you why. It doesn't
Mhm.
give you the backstory. And it also doesn't tell you necessarily what they're going to do in the future, because you're kind of missing that qualitative, more emotional piece. So I think for brands, I see them analyzing data in ways that are just a little bit one-sided.
Mhm.
So, helping them understand that they need to unlock the full 360 view of their customer. I always say, like, trend, culture, mindset, values. You have to know that, put those together with your data, then you're getting a full picture of your customer, but it can't just be one-sided. And, I think along with that, the other thing that I see brands do is just not understanding their customer well enough.
Mhm.
And, when I was doing my master's degree, had a professor, and he was saying in our business class, you should know that you're every customer on a first name basis, and of course, as you scale, that's harder. But I've always kept that with me, because I,
Mhm.
I think of that a lot. Like, you have to know everything about your customer. You have to understand, their struggles, what's hard about their lives, what they're worried about, what they care about. All of those things matter. And, developing empathy and kind of putting yourself in their shoes and understanding what their needs are really is what it's all about. And I think companies sort of rush that part a little bit, or they get part of the picture put
Mhm.
together. But you got to go deep there, and then you can build on that. And that's your foundation. But if you don't have that, I think it puts a lot of companies kind of on the back foot from the beginning.
Interesting. Once you have that understanding, what do you do with that information? Like, how do you make that connection? How do you get on the first name basis? And again, like you said, obviously that's difficult as you scale, but what are some of the tools that you have seen implemented successfully that start to walk down that path to be able to make that kind of connection with the customer?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, like, qualitative research is a huge part for me. So what that looks like in my world is a lot of different things. So it used to be a lot of in-person focus groups. That's obviously been hard lately. But I think, the main thing with qualitative research is you have to find ways to stay really close to the customer. But you
Mhm.
have to continue having conversations with them. So interestingly, during COVID, Clubhouse coming out, that's
Yeah.
been a really important tool for me. And, I've been invited also by a couple of universities to come and speak to their student groups and get the chance to connect with, teen customers and ask them questions and kind of understand where their heads are. So, that part of my research is really important. And then in addition to that, it's really about just, I have this research pattern that I do a ton of research. And so I have places I go. Social media has been amazing for that because, teens are such an open book. They're always sharing what they're doing, what they're up to. So you really get a chance to see their lifestyles. So, I do a lot of that. And then from there, it's about looking at all this information, having all these conversations, and then starting to connect these dots. And when you do this for so long, and, I'm coming up on, 16, 17 years of doing this, you really start to see those dots a lot earlier, and you start to see those patterns emerge a lot earlier. So that's sort of what that landscape looks like.
Yeah, that's cool. And again, picking up all of these insights from data and all of that, I absolutely love, coming from a place of actual learning and data and results rather than just taking a guess and taking a stab at it and saying that we think, this is what's what the next trend is or what have you. And actually, speaking of that, what are some of the trends that are coming up? Is it all about, recycling and all of that, or are there any other ones that you see, on the horizon?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, one of the ideas that I'm working on currently is this idea of the end of trend, and what it looks like really for future consumers. So, for so long, teen fashion has been driven by this like endless trend cycle.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen fast fashion retailers fail a bit over the last couple of years. But we've seen others grow, like ASOS has done huge business during COVID. A lot of these digital first retailers are continuing to grow. So it's really, just kind of looking into that space and thinking about where the trend cycle is headed. And I think that what we're seeing is teen consumers, they're not so driven by this idea of fitting in. They're not driven by this idea so much of all needing to look the same way or wear the same way. They're very individualistic, but they're also very community minded. So, they're more accepting. And what I see is almost more fragmentation happening, more kind of silos developing. And that's harder for big companies. But I think it's important for them to understand is, you can't really try to tap into teen culture anymore if you're a youth brand, because it feels disingenuous. It comes off as inauthentic, and it worked for a really long time, but it doesn't work now. So, what brands have to understand is that they have to, build rich relationships with their customer, build an ecosystem of communication. And, my mantra is exist to enrich your customers' culture, not to tap into it. So that's sort of the main thing brands have to know. And when they do that, it's really more about having a conversation, and it's less about trying to, scan the market for trends. It's more about just supporting their lifestyle at that point. So it's, it's a different way of thinking about trend, and it's a slower trend cycle also, which I think is really important for brands to know. Like we've seen over the last few years, I call them holding patterns, where, we see trends come along and then we kept waiting for them to move along quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And they're hanging out. And I think that's not going anywhere anytime soon. So that's a huge shift.
And when you're saying, a trend, again, obviously I'm a guy. So what types of trends would we be speaking of that, are sort of in this holding pattern that you haven't moved out yet? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, a huge one, like the teen market has been dominated by like every tie-dye effect you can possibly imagine for like almost 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And then especially with regards to fleece. So like, tie-dye fleece has been a top key item across the entire industry for literally years now. I mean, we never used to see things like that happen. So I think it's, part of it is this shift towards craving comfort. But I think part of it is also familiarity, and, that being really important. Another one is this idea of 90s nostalgia. And we saw that crop up, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And I think that's not unusual. I think when we get a new teen cohort, we usually see them kind of do a throwback.
Yeah.
You know, when I was in college, it was all about the 80s. And so we saw 90s pop up, but it's just still here. And I think that's interesting because it really speaks to, you know, this idea that people are seeking nostalgia. I think anything pre-digital technology feels quaint
Hmm.
now
Hmm.
to us. And so I think there's a lot in there for customer mindset when you think about the fact that like we're still obsessed with the 90s. We're craving comfort, we're craving familiarity, we're craving this idea of, you know, like landlines and like in-person conversations. And so, you know, so those trends are kind of in a holding pattern, but what I love to do is go deeper. Like, yes, this is trending, okay, but why?
Hmm.
And then like continue to kind of drill down into that and understand like what it is about culture, what it is about that emotional life of your customer that's keeping these here and making them not kind of move along.
Yeah, that's great. That's it's so interesting. Like, I've never really considered fashion as in depth, as what you're speaking about. So, really, really interesting how you get in and dissect all of the information and you know derive what direction to go with that. Um, what's next for Moonshot? Are you guys working on anything that you're excited about or looking forward to being able to release?
Yeah, so this circularity project is going to take up most of 2021, and so there'll be a report published kind of towards the end of the year that should be just an amazing guide for brands that want to understand it and want to understand where they can kind of connect with customers along that circular journey. And then apart from that, there's tons of great content coming up. So you know, on Clubhouse a lot. We do a weekly power hour on Thursdays at 2 Eastern time, and we talk all things youth culture and fashion. So we've covered topics from inclusivity in the fashion industry to, you know, next week we're covering how Gen Z is changing the face of luxury and, you know,
Mhm.
what that looks like. So different topics every week, different guests every week. But yeah, so just it's all about curating conversations with this, you know, network that Moonshot has of people who are just really tapped into the fashion industry and experts at what they do and experts in different types of fields. So yeah, we're just continuing to explore and research.
Very cool. And what's your clubhouse name if people want to
It's
join?
Katie Irving. You can follow me on Clubhouse. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. If people wanted to reach out, and obviously we just got the clubhouse name there, but if people want to learn more about Moonshot or yourself, what would be the best way to get in touch?
Best way to connect with Moonshot is on Instagram. So we're at the Moonshot Agency. And if you hit the link in bio, we have a free report that's just been published called New Genesis. And that is really a look at the next decade. And it is all about the 5 actions that brands need to take to survive and thrive. So, you know, New Genesis really looks at all these big changes that are coming that are driven by youth customers. But it also is very action focused and kind of helps brands understand what they can do to continue to stay aligned with these customers and continue to grow.
I love it. I love it. Katie, this has been fantastic. Thank you for the time. And I've got a few friends that are in the fashion industry and that, so certainly going to pass this on to them, and hopefully you'll be hearing from them, and maybe you can talk to them on Clubhouse or something. So,
Amazing. Yeah, I would
but
love to. This has been great. Thank you so much.
no problem.